After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
Takes all the guesswork out. And it's looking like, I don't know, if Twitter does collapse, I don't really have any intention to go onto another platform, but what do you think's the most likely scenario? Is everyone going to migrate to Tumblr? Is Mastodon really going to be, you know?
No, I honestly, I don't know. I feel like someone's just going to have to like create a new, I mean, I know Mastodon is already kind of that, but I think someone's just going to have to create a new, almost identical platform.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's probably what would happen, is like Musk maybe tanks the shit, but fumbles owning the IP for like the actual Twitter tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, yeah, everyone will just probably port themselves over and pretend that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think that's what'll happen.
Yeah. I mean, on the flip side, though, like I started seeing like product sales as tweets for the first time, like the way you would on Instagram or Facebook or something. And it's like, we have a sale going on this. I don't know. The item was like a record player.
Yeah.
That ends in 24 hours. And I'm like, oh, yep. Platform's gone to shit. Let's go.
Right.
All right. Well, hey, folks. Death of Twitter aside, it's another episode of Greenhouse Gaslighting. Joining me today is co-host Josh.
Glad to be on again. I've been looking forward to this eagerly.
Right, because, you know, I think last year I was a bit more ambivalent about doing an election breakdown, but this was, once again, the most important election of our lifetimes. And I'm actually curious to, you know, consider how the center will hold, as long as people continue to say that about elections. But the red wave hypothesis has been fundamentally broken down at this point, hasn't it?
100%. I mean, it was, you know, red wave, red tsunami, whatever they wanted to call it, that collapsed. And it was weird. It was a weird feeling on election day. I remember, like, for me, the first sign that like things were going to be weird was from, of all people, Charlie Kirk. There was like these things where there was like, I was seeing like clips from the show where he's just having this meltdown about Arizona, where he's like, you're gonna need like 10 times the votes you're getting. I'm like, Arizona was considered like probably almost certainly going to be going for Carrie Lake, but I think, you know, last I checked, I don't think it's been called officially yet, but it has. I mean, she doesn't really have a path to victory at this point. It's looking incredibly unlikely.
This has been a much closer midterm season than I initially gambled. With the Senate, I think we still have the runoff in Georgia pending.
Yeah, and like, I mean, I was gonna say it doesn't matter. It does matter, but there's some interesting things with that one where, you know, because it'll determine if the Democrats have like a 51 seat majority, but the control of the Senate is no longer really up for grabs, which I think is going to really demobilize the Walker voters out there, which were already like kind of like they were carried by like up ballot races, right? Like the Brian Kemp race clearly got way more turnout than Walker did. The fact that, like, you know, you're going to lose a lot of money that might have been pumping into that race if it was going to decide control the Senate again. And another interesting implication with it is, assuming Warnock wins, this will actually be the very first Senate race, like cycle, where every incumbent senator won re-election.
Which is... Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some weird firsts with this election.
Yeah.
And I guess, like, I don't know, like, I'll admit I was initially pessimistic at first. I was really expecting Democrats to get crushed. And for them to have actually made certain gains in certain states and in other places kind of just hold the center was a welcome surprise, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it looks like rather than gain ground, we're now at like a new stage of gridlock. And like we mentioned with the Senate, the Senate is broadly going to be either a 50, like a very slim majority, or tied. The House also, I mean, there's like what, 15 races still to be called or something like that?
Something like that. It's looking like, Republicans are likely going to take the House, but with like the narrowest of majorities. And, I tell my students a lot that like, John Boehner's speakership, which is really kind of when we saw like the GOP just kind of like just fully drink the Kool-Aid, right?
Right.
He could not control that caucus with a much more sizable majority. I am skeptical that Kevin McCarthy can control. I mean, already we're seeing like Matt Gaetz saying he's not going to support him. Other people saying they're not going to support Kevin McCarthy as well. I mean, they're going to have a real leadership battle where you could even end up with Democrats in the minority with Speaker Pelosi somehow still, just because of like some weird coalition that might form because of how like kind of ungovernable that caucus is.
Right. And it's, I guess like, you have to look at the midterms as like the affirmation of your predictions or the rejection of those, right? And try to use that as like a, moment to like analyze the moment again. And I think it's like, there has definitely been a repudiation of like certain right-wing extremist views. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
definitely nothing changing the status quo either. So we're still in this like bizarre, like hold the center as long as we can kind of vibe. But a point that, and this is just the angle I'm going to start with because there's a lot of angles to break down these results with. I think in an earlier episode, we were talking about how Biden's overall approach to the midterms was to kind of distance himself from the rest of the party as much as possible and let various state candidates swim or sink independent of him.
And to be fair, like I'll just interject into that. That's sort of the secular approach, right? That's always like midterms. I mean, I think you've shared a few memes with me at least with like some of the Obama era, right? Where like, that's when you got in like, Democrats that won during like Obama or like Joe Manchin, right? Like right. They were like, who's like, shooting the cap and trade bill, like this signature piece of Obama administration legislation. And like all this stuff, like you have like during the midterm, it's always like the president, they're punished through their party. And so they don't want to, like the members of the party don't generally want the president like campaigning with them and whatnot. And, certainly like, some of the traits of that were still here. I think, like Biden has low approval rating comparatively. But again, like I think we're kind of past the point of approval rating necessarily mattering. It's going to always be, I think, underwater for every president going forward until like there's some substantial cultural change in this country where there's a little less polarization. But yeah, I mean, like, Biden definitely was not necessarily, putting himself front and center of most of these races.
Right. And like, I think I sent that video to you of him congratulating various governors who won their races and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the equivalent, like the caption of it was the guy who did nothing in the group project and still gets an A.
Yeah.
That definitely seems to be the kind of W Brandon is collecting for this one. But I definitely say that, they flew by the seat of their pants on this one. But I don't know if it's safe to call this a W for the Democrats. But they definitely, got saved by the skin of their teeth is how I'm feeling about this.
Yeah, and I think, like it. Like criticizing Biden's approach, I think is fair. I mean, and criticizing the party in general, right? I think that like
I'd be out of a job if I didn't do that.
Right? Yeah. I mean, like I definitely think that they didn't like that's not really going to be the emphasis of the episode, but I think that like I was worried about the midterms because I felt that they did a poor job with like a national message, and I think even like on the abortion issue, Michigan, like yes, it was on the ballot and that was a big part, but like Gretchen Whitmer did not like let up on that issue, right? She didn't let, her opponent hide her on like, well, governors don't really have anything to do with abortion, which is completely dishonest. she didn't let up on that, but like I think elsewhere you kind of saw them like, well, like yeah, let's just accept that there's a crime wave and say that I'm going to run against the crime wave too. Like I think I found there was one study that I saw that more Democrats actually took the tough on crime narrative than Republicans and stuff like that. And when you concede to their narrative, you get stuff like in New York where they lost pretty awfully. Florida too. Though Florida is kind of how inspiring is like the political chameleon that is Charlie Crist going to be for anyone for that matter, let alone Democrats.
Yeah, and it's like that particular point goes to show just how much of a even if they didn't lose badly this midterm cycle, Democrats are still somewhat prostrate to how they've been perceived by certain people on the right.
Yeah.
Post, the 2020 protest wave and shit like that. So they're still like not coming out as like proto New Dealers the way that certain op-ed columnists would have decreed earlier last year.
Well, even we're still seeing some of them do it, and of course the emphasis on quote unquote extreme candidates. There's a pardon the analogy. There's a colored approach to who they consider to be extreme.
That's also correct. Yeah. So I mean, I'm trying to figure out because this is a big fucking fish to fry. So I guess overall results, Democrats do win by the skin of their teeth, but barely. We're going to be looking at a gridlocked House and Senate.
Well, I think the Senate will probably be better off. And like one of the things that's going to change its gridlock is that like there's just going to be less legislation from the House, right? So like they're going to be able to focus more on appointments. Yes, there might be some weird ones that kind of have issues like there was in the first term. I think God, what was that one big fight over? It wasn't HUD. Doesn't really matter, but you might get some appointment battles and stuff like that. But I think the Senate's going to be interesting. The House, it's going to be, and we'll see, right? I mean, are we going to get like Hunter Biden laptop committee? Are we going to open that up to the public? Are we just going to like basically just stream revenge porn of Hunter Biden, with prostitutes and stuff like that for the nation to see? Like, I don't know. I mean, like it's gonna be really weird.
I'm betting 50 on that right now. I'm pretty sure that's gonna come up.
Well, it's funny too because I mean, like I think one of the things that like Republicans were tended to be punished for this midterm cycle is just like kind of like the vapidness of like conservatism and just like where like even like Tudor Dixon, right? Is like like weeks before the election is like, well, COVID was actually manufactured by Democrats in revenge for losing the Civil War, and it's like what? Like it's like I don't think that like oh hey this candidate is on like the same 4chan threads that I'm on. I don't know if that's really a winning message.
Right.
And like the Hunter Biden thing, it's like they've lost the plot on that. There was like kind of a point about like the efficacy of like people benefiting off of their family and government and sort of getting positions that are international. Like, ooh, is he like trading national secrets to like make more money? Like that's there are like red flags that are raised, but they've like changed that to like, oh well, like this guy
he's a degenerate pervert.
Yeah, it's really like he does lines of cocaine. Like, look at this picture of him in a threesome. Like, what a wacko. Like, it's like honestly, like this seems to be a better fit for your like alpha male theology than like anyone else you're putting up. Like, I mean, why? Like, everyone's talking about like, are we gonna get Trump Biden 2024? Why not Biden 2024? I mean, like, I think they found their guy.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, and like the way I've been trying to process the way these midterms played out to me is like, I still think the suburban strategy is in effect for both parties. I still think the culture war is the dominant terrain, as we've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
But I think like you mentioned, once Republicans get their goal of like trying to make wins only on the cultural front, like they've been doing the past couple months, especially with the abortion issue, like one, it exposes like they have really nothing to do after the point other than like the cultural shit, which for the average suburban voter who like is concerned about like again, not that I support the angle, but the way that there's a resurgence of tough on crime rhetoric, you know, that appeals to that crowd. When you have
the crowd who's, you know, far from the inner cities that are
exactly
rampant with crime.
Right, exactly. So like I feel like that at least speaks to that crowd in some capacity. Then you have the economic front, you know, and middle class like voters have their set of priorities they prefer with that, which is, you know, not in my backyard usually. And then you've got just like this general like revulsion to like unseemly shit, right? And not that that's inherently a bad thing, but then that means like you have these bizarre instances of, you know, this cohort being repelled by Trump, not by any, you know, particular ideology of his, but really because he's, you know, unpleasant. And then that also leads to the same cohort who's also like, I think the protest wave in 2020 was too far. They shouldn't have done any of that. And that's not how you bring up your grievances in society. I think it's the same cohort, right?
Right. Well, and like, you know, that cohort, like, I mean, you know, it's hard. I think it's probably pretty difficult to necessarily like have the intellectual dissonance to be like those protesters, you know, in the wake of George Floyd went too far and not think like, oh shit, these people that stormed the Capitol building.
Right.
You know, it's like, you know, any argument that you could have had to keep pointing at like, oh, well, you know, look at these people that were like, you know, rioting in the city and whatnot. And, you know, maybe that's more close to home. But like, you also like these same people are also like, you know, like I wanted to personally invite the people who did this into my office to like, you know, congratulate them on overthrowing the government. Like, you know, it's hard to like necessarily unravel that as like not being just as bad, if not worse, if you're in that mindset.
100%, right? And I think like basically what you can say about this cohort in a nutshell is like they don't like the drama per se. I don't think that's the best way to say it, but it's like,
well, I think for them, they want politics to not be like important or visible, really.
Exactly. They want to grill. And I think like that's the overall animus behind suburban voters this cycle. You know, they saw the right, you know, either not deliver for them in terms of like you know, property taxes or whatever shit they care about. They didn't see anything like
well, I think too, like I feel like this whole cycle was very policy light.
Exactly.
Like, and I think that's why like abortion was so poignant, right? You know, it's not like, you know, yes, it's reproductive rights, all that stuff's important to a lot of people, and not to undermine that, but I think that like on both parties, it was really the only thing that was like a clear, identifiable policy line, right? You know, looking at in Michigan, for example, right? That was, I think, the clearest thing on both candidates' platform was abortion good, abortion bad. There was like talk about education, but like I don't think either of them really had a good like sense of communicating what they wanted. They're like, oh, well, we'll you know, pursue efforts to boost literacy rates. It's like, okay, well, like what efforts?
Exactly.
Let's not talk about that. Let's, you know, like the policy end was pretty, you know, open. Whereas, you know, abortion, a lot more, you know, like, yeah, like, do we think that you have a fundamental right to, you know, have bodily autonomy and whatnot over your reproductive organs? And that's kind of, I think that's one reason why it was a big winner. And it's in some ways it should serve as like somewhat of a wake up alarm to a lot of these politicians, right? Is that like you can't run on nothing. And I think on the right in particular, they saw that like the reason they ran on nothing, even on abortion in some cases, was that they're like, what we want to run on is deeply unpopular.
Right, but it's the only thing that generates fervor for the base at this
Yeah.
point, right? And I think I think the thing I was trying to say so shittily these past couple minutes was like, this is a cohort of people that resents fervor of any kind. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They don't want to see it. And then the right that is effervescent right now is for like something that like is, it's deeply unpopular. There's no one else they can flip on it. I mean, hell, like we talked about this last time, but they ran out of like the usual pro-life arguments. Everyone that they wanted to convince on it, it's already been convinced, or it doesn't care. So they had to lie about, Prop 3 in Michigan, for example, it's too complicated. It's too complicated. Don't vote for it. And it's one of the most modest proposals on reproductive rights I've ever read.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically just a codification of Roe, which is kind of weird too, because I think it's, from midterms, we usually kind of see them like punish the incumbent party for like quote unquote policy overreach, but really it was overturning Roe that was the big policy overreach that people responded to.
Right. Because like I don't think something like on-demand abortion would have the level of popularity that Prop 3 had, for example, like just as a hypothetical.
Well, and it's hard too, because like for it to have that popularity, because for years, the Democratic, like the average Democrat was like, well, I think abortions should be safe and legal but rare. Right.
That's the popular consensus. So like something like that, which I guess by the constraints of our system would be deemed extreme, right? Mm-hmm. That would make it to the mainstream. But then like Republicans to basically backdoor this way through the courts and create just like a very rabid fervor. Like I think the phenomenon that me and you didn't pay attention to, just because like it doesn't tie into our daily lives, but probably for other people it does, right? Is all these like school board meetings getting like hostily taken over by like culture warriors, not even in a coherent way, but just to like talk about some benign or asinine thing as like an example of grooming, whatever that means now.
Mm-hmm. Like I found the Kama Sutra in my son's elementary library. Like total bullshit, but it's just like whatever they can come up with to like kind of suggest that like they're being groomed for the sexual deviances of their mentors and whatnot. I don't know.
Yeah. So like I feel like definitely the suburban cohort was looking at this stuff and was like, shut this shit down. I don't want to see it. Regardless of how they feel about queer people. Mm-hmm. Was definitely on the okay, this is too much even for me. I mean that's like the logic that won out.
Yeah, I mean like those people, it's like like they don't want to see the litter boxes in classrooms or whatever just convoluted made up thing is, but like I think that they did a bad job of convincing people that lie was true, because like when you hear it, right, like I mean like yeah, I mean you're kind of curious, right? Like if I told you like, oh hey, like guess what I just installed in my classroom, like a litter box, like you're probably like, wait, what? Like you want to like there's a follow up there, but they're just like intellectually like incurious, like oh yeah, like 100% there's your schools have litter boxes, your your son and daughter's classmates, they're taking a shit in the corner of the room, probably your son or daughter's the one who has to clean it up at the end of the day, so really force that down your throat. But like just these weird things, just
I don't even know like what level of depravity you have to be at to spread those kinds of rumors, right? Like what disease place are you coming from?
We should ask Joe Rogan.
Fucking hell. I really don't know, because on the one hand, like it's also sad that like the reason why people didn't oppose these things, it wasn't rooted in anything.
It's not like rooted in their own personal morals or like
it's
they
not
want to like help these
liberation.
communities. It's like no, they're just like this sounds kind of stupid. I probably don't. It's just like
this, and I think like it creates this like the kind of fervor that you want to have in like a progressive or left wing context of like, hey, we can change society, we can make it more equitable, we can, correct certain systemic injustices, those won't win out with this crowd. But then also, like, refreshingly, I won't say it's a good thing, but at least, like, you can count on it, is like when this stuff just like keeps making the airwaves and keeps getting it, rather than people buying into it, and it's like, oh yeah, that's bullshit. I think people are also like, man, shut that shit off. I don't want to hear this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't lead to like what you would hope for, which is, then a deeper interrogation of like, who is saying this shit and who are they trying to hurt? Because that's where I think people like us, where we step in and we're like, who the fuck is saying this and what agenda do they have? But I think most people don't go that far.
Well, and I think too, one of the weaknesses from like our perspective, right, as far as like trying to persuade people these things, is a lot of the American public, particularly in that cohort, just doesn't care, right? I mean, I asked for my attendance question in class, I had to ask, what race or election were they most interested in for like election day? Mm-hmm. There was a dude who put NASCAR. Like, no, not trying to roast the guy.
Dudes fucking rock. Dudes fucking rock. Let's go.
I'm not like besmirching the guy or anything, but like that shows like a profound, like, I am not invested in anything, right? I'm like, he probably hasn't watched NASCAR at all, right? Like, he's just like, he's just being silly. Like, I'm just gonna put NASCAR. I don't give a shit about the governor race. I don't give a shit about Congress. Like, fair enough. More power to you. Like, but that's, I think that's like, it's, people underestimate how much that like is reflective in the public, right? They're not invested in these issues. They don't want to talk to you about them. Which I know sounds like we're like literally screwing into the void with that context, but yeah, it's just like there is this big sense of like apathy that they kind of want, like, just like, yeah, like I'll engage in this stuff when I want to and never outside of it.
Pretty much. I think speaking on consistently, and I don't know if there's been enough of like a breakdown of how this played out in this recent cycle, but like I still think voter apathy, even among people who vote regularly, right? I think people have this kind of like, okay, I bubbled in my shit and I turned it in. I'm not invested in the well-being of this particular party anymore,
Sure.
And it's like, I'm very curious about those perspectives, but I'm not sure, one, they fit the purposes of the Democratic Party, especially when like they need all hands on deck for their approach right now. Mm-hmm. And also, like, I think the reporting, and not necessarily all the studies done on US politics, but like some of it comes from people who still revere America and its institutions. So the concept of voter apathy is something like they find personally repugnant, and I feel like they might be just biased against considering it at some level.
I think it's a mix. I think some people do that definitely see it as like inherently repugnant, right? And they don't necessarily like, at least in academia, I feel like that crowd, it's like, you can sort of split it, but I think, generally most people in that crowd are like, it's repugnant, these people are idiots, versus the follow-up of like, well, why are they apathetic? And, right. And I don't necessarily think that like, I think it's probably overly optimistic to think that like, well, if, we gave them universal health care, they'd probably suddenly care. Of
course. Like, I think there's a deep individualism at the heart of American culture right now, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, there's factors like that go into it, aside from just, oh, we don't have progressive policies and people don't care. Like, it is a little more complex than that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess final call, who's the biggest winner of the midterms? Who actually
Ron DeSantis.
Ron fucking DeSantis.
I mean, that's kind of the pitchfork thing, but I mean, God, it's insane seeing like the outpouring of support for him. So, Republicans are like, well, this is all Trump's fault. He nominated bad candidates, or he endorsed bad candidates, and like, it's weird too because in a lot of cases, I hate to say this that like because like so Trump had this one kind of viral thing where he said that like if the candidates he wins and win if he endorsed win, he deserves all the credit, but if they lose, he deserves none of the blame. But he'll probably be the opposite, which I mean, he was correct about that. But it's like, and I hate to say this, but it's like I kind of on some level agree with him. I think that like in a lot of cases he just did what the party told him. Like, okay, like endorse Oz. I don't think he endorsed him in the primary. I could be wrong, but like Dixon he endorsed in the primary, and the same people who are like, well, Trump cost us, the election writ large. Those same people are like, let's put Dixon in charge of the MRP or the Republican Party of Michigan. It's like, what? Like, you're like, he endorsed shit candidates, but we want these shit candidates in positions of power. Even when, the election's over. It's super bizarre. So, like, the establishment is sort of rallying behind DeSantis because DeSantis did really good in Florida. Basically, the Michigan or the Florida Democratic Party did not turn out. Again, I can't entirely blame them when Charlie Crist is who you're turning out for, right? Like, I get it. Where you're just like, what's the point? A negative partisanship only goes so far, I guess. But I think we're likely it's going to be interesting to see he's going to be kind of forced to run for president. I think at this point, seemingly against Trump. Trump is due to make an announcement tomorrow, as of this recording. So we'll see.
Shit, we should set up a live stream. Just
I don't know when he's doing it though. That's the problem.
That's awesome. That's fucking awesome. I'm gonna make an announcement when. I'm not fucking telling anybody. That's fucking awesome.
Well, apparently he wanted to I can't remember if it was the Pennsylvania rally or one of the others. But he was gonna do it there, and like and already those rallies completely upstage the candidates on the ballot, and I think that's something that's being missed too from these like Republican analysis. Is it's like I think that like some of these candidates would have probably done worse without him because he at least strikes a fervor with their like grassroots base that I mean, do you think like a Trump voter without Trump's like placid endorsement of Dr. Oz would ever even like look twice at him?
So the thing that's getting me about all of this is the specter of Trump looms, but how large a shadow he casts really depends on one thing. And it's like how badly your brain was broken by 2016, right? Because like as you're saying all this, like I'm starting to just remember like, no, wait, what 2016 was like a repudiation of the Republican Party establishment.
Yeah.
And a realignment under Trump himself. And the whole point of Trump, like, yes, there were weird like crypto fascists in his administration. Yes, like there was like a big far right push. Yes, like there's these weirdos who fucking like turn out for him, and like his policies overall were just the worst excesses of American nationalism and neoliberalism run amok, right? However, the thing about the Trump years is that there's one guy at the center of it. It's him. The Republican Party works for Trump. Every candidate who wants to win during the Trump years is doing like a ritual worship of Trump in the primary. You know what I mean? Like there were a bunch of like, even just at the local level in the Trump years, right? Like how many candidates did you see like do the little red border and the 4 stars above their name and write their names in bold like font to look like the Trump logo, right? So like we are in a bizarre stage where it's like, what does the Republican Party do post-Trump?
Well, and I would add too, like the problem is like it's not even really post-Trump because he's still around. He can still run again. It seems like
that's what I'm getting at is like the Republican establishment is trying to like eke themselves out of the rock they've been under this entire time and like try to like get the reins back from Trump.
Yeah,
not
and
realizing the hold he still has. You know what I mean?
right, and I was thinking about this before too, or like more recently, was that like, when the Republican Party was all about, the party of Reagan, let's emulate Reagan, like every candidate is Reagan, the second coming of Reagan, the third coming of Jesus Christ, all this stuff. Like they had the benefit of the fact that Reagan was either a vegetable or dead. Like he was gone. Like there's the myth of him, and you can emulate that, but he was himself was gone. Trump, I mean, even DeSantis. I mean, I showed my class
Wait,
this
didn't they
ad.
already start beefing?
What was that?
Didn't Trump and DeSantis already start beefing?
Yeah, they already started beefing, but like I remember when DeSantis ran for governor, he put out this ad that was like, like his wife's like, "Oh, Ron loves Donald Trump, but he cares about other things too." And it's like him playing with his kid, and it's like, "Oh, build the wall," and like let's read, make it, art of the deal. Like, can you read this? Make America great again. It's just literally like indoctrinating his kid to love Trump. Let's change my body language to be like Donald Trump. You are trying to emulate a guy that you are going to run against. How does that work?
I'm worried for Ron DeSanctimonious. I'm real worried for him because whoever is in the Republican establishment being like, "No, bro, you got this."
Right, and like let's say
He's gonna get wiped in that primary debate.
I mean, he's going to be completely rolled, and it's going to be embarrassing. Like he almost got rolled by Charlie Crist. Like Crist. Like he's just like, "Oh, are you gonna run are you gonna still be governor? Or are you gonna run for president?" And he's just like, blue screen of death." Like how, like just
He got rolled by kids wearing masks. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, there's that.
He does not know how to riff, and like that's where, if you want to argue where Biden can hold his ground against Trump, Biden has that like Sopranos reject energy going on. You know what I mean? Where it's like he can.
I mean, I'd be worried about like a Biden DeSantis race, just because like,
of course,
like you have a lot of like negatives. It's just like, well, like, hey, like this guy's younger, all that, but like at the same time, I mean, I think voters, they really don't like just naked ambition, which is like just
that's why Rubio didn't get as far as he did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and like, who's talking about Rubio for 2024? No one, not a soul is talking about this guy, and he was the great white savior of the Republican Party going into 2016, and no one talks about him now. No one cares about him. He's a non-entity, and he just won his Senate race in the same state as DeSantis. No one's saying like, "Oh, hey, like he won in a quote-unquote purple state," which doesn't seem to be much the case anymore. We should really, run with DeSantis, not Rubio. Like no one cares about him anymore. And like even on the Democratic side, right? I was telling my students today that like honestly, the worst thing to happen to Kamala Harris's political career was becoming vice president. No one talks about her now in any way that's like remotely like this is someone who like could be the future of our country. And that was the whole thing, was it was like heir apparent, and now it's like just this non-entity because she's ambitious. She flew too close to the sun.
So this raises two questions for me, both on the same tangent, right? Which is like both parties have basically gone into a midterm with no they put on a show for sure, but who really is like constituting the establishment of either party, who's like the whip hand in the relationships of those parties, is still like somewhat unclear, right? So on the Republican side, we've talked about the specter of Trump, even though like Trump doesn't really sit within the traditional machinery of the Republican Party. So the first question is like, what alternative force to Trump exists within the Republican Party after these midterms? Is there a new faction that is not intent on imitating him, or conversely, I guess it doesn't matter for this example, because like with DeSantis, they are trying to imitate him. And then similarly on the Democratic side, right? We have this loose confederacy under Biden. No one's challenging the old man's authority, but a lot of people think they could do a better job. That being said, I don't think there's anyone popular left within the Democratic coalition. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely there's a vacuum there. Like if he goes away, I think it can be filled. I think I've seen a lot of people talk about how even close to home, someone like Whitmer could be someone who has like sort of like these like Midwest sort of like ties to the working class. And I think particularly if like as like in Michigan there was a sweep for the state house and Senate, giving Democrats control of those for the first
Yeah,
time
the
in 40
Michigan
years.
Democratic Party did way better than the federal party overall.
Yeah, I mean here
propositions swept everything.
yeah, like it was huge here. A lot of that comes down to Prop 3, but like I think her campaign I think did a really good job, and I think they really pushed Prop 3, and I think sort of pushed back on that too confusing misinformation campaign and stuff like that. But I think someone like that, or was it Pritzker in Illinois? I can't remember if that's his name. He's another one.
God, okay.
He's another one I've seen kind of float around, but like there's no one in like at the national level, like true national, like no one in Congress that I think, and part of that's because like the congressional leaders have just held on way too long, right? They're all in their 80s. They're spent, right? Pelosi, I was convinced. I've seen her speak recently after her husband's attack. I was once convinced that she was going to die in office, and to be fair, her husband's attacker probably was thinking the same thing. Just a little bit more proactive in that. But I could see her, I don't know if she'll resign in this upcoming Congress, but I don't see her sticking around much longer.
I think that's the fair assessment, right? And even if she like does kick the bucket, it does like go to show like who there is no successor. Maybe that's something that like a Pete Buttigieg or a Kamala was competing for once upon a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they don't have any like real base of support. You have these like candidates who become like a bit of a meme on Twitter. So you have like the AstroTurf shit with like Pritzker, or even like recently, like Fetterman became a bit of a meme, but I don't think he's presidential material at all. You could even
I mean even pre-stroke, I wouldn't say that.
Right. So it's like, and I think like again, I was a Bernard brother, but I don't see the old man making a comeback in 2024. I don't.
No, I mean I know he's like flirted with it, but it's just like again, it's like, and I think in his case, like I don't know if it's a failure on his end that there's not like a name successor. I mean that sounds kind of undemocratic, like when we like use that term. But like there's no like clear heir apparent, right? Like I mean who's in the wings of even like the Bernie like sector of the party? I guess like maybe AOC. I don't see her getting. I mean I think she kind of has like the Clinton issues of like being this nationalized figure long before like those types of ambitions would manifest. And that kind of like, I mean, they've been essentially, I mean, look at how many campaign ads across the country tied, candidates to AOC. Like, oh, this is, they're part of this wing of the party, even if there's no evidence of that, right? And that's, kind of the weird thing of like nominating moderates is like, you're like, well, it'll convince voters that, we are, not going to pursue those policies. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, just nominate whoever you think is going to be like, I mean, if you truly believe those policies, just be upfront about it, right? Like, right. Yeah, like, I want, I don't know, who's some token moderate. I want Joe Manchin. I mean, he's probably too far on the other side of it, but like, I really want Joe Manchin because I agree with him politically over AOC, not because like, well, if we nominate a socialist, they might, attack them as a socialist. It's like, if Joe Manchin ran for president, God forbid, like he could probably be pinned as a socialist. Maybe in his case, it might be a little bit more difficult, but you get my general meaning.
Right. Yeah, and like again, the same phenomenon, albeit slightly different in flavor, does exist on the Republican side, where it's like we mentioned, Trump had totalized the entire Republican brand onto his personal brand. Mm-hmm. So even with issues like immigration, foreign policy, the economy, COVID, all that shit, it just became like, how does he aggrandize himself? How does he earn the adoration of his base, basically, rather than provide any coherent alternative? And the other thing too is, like, as a result, Trump is not bound to the Republican machinery in the way that someone like DeSantis is, you know? So
Yeah.
it just begs the question, like, you either have like Trump wannabes who are loyal to the Republican machinery in some way, but for even if they do win their local or state races, having them compete on the national stage against Trump, I don't see them having the juice. Or you have like alternatives who were formerly influential in the Republican establishment, but again have been
Time for
rejected
the
as
Jeb comeback.
well, I mean, but that's what I'm saying is, like, 2016 was a repudiation of Jeb. It was a repudiation of the Romneys. It was a repudiation of Rubio, all these guys.
And I mean, like, and that's the thing too, is it's like the stuff that I'm hearing them say about Trump, I've heard it all before. I heard it all from them before in 2016, and they couldn't do anything. Right? I mean, like, there's some things that are different, right? I mean, like, think of how appalled they were that, like, and speaking of repudiation, so like the Romneys one, Trump basically ran against every like Republican nominee or successful candidate before him, right? He was like, Bush sucked, he gave us Iraq, that was a really bad move. Romney sucked, he's a loser, screw him. John McCain, crippled loser, not a war hero. He was captured, like all like it was he won that party by attacking the people that had failed to deliver for them. And I mean, is that going to be the tactic that they use against Trump? Like, is DeSantis going to be like, I mean, what's he going to run on? Like, Trump brought you the vaccine, that's bad. Like, that seems to be the only game plan that I can see like any hint of.
And I think that's the thing is, like, on that side of the ballot, the issue is Trump. That's what you're voting for. Are you voting yes on Trump or no on Trump?
Yeah.
Oh man, maybe we should count our blessings on our little side of this. Like, yeah, we can complain all day about how a socialist challenge has been shut out of the Democratic Party and all this shit. But at least we don't have one guy totalizing the entire machinery.
Exactly. I mean, even if like, I mean, I know there's like all like, the sort of
it's very
shadow
cold comfort. It's very cold comfort. I know.
Yeah. But... And I know there's like always like, the shadow implications of like, ooh, is this like actually happening under, Biden? Is like Dark Brandon is all going according to, plan with him. Like,
is he calling up the Pope? Yes.
Yeah. Is he calling up the Pope? Like, the Queen is dead. The Irishman has been triumphant. It's all this stuff. Like, and it's fun, right? It's all in good fun. It's definitely preferable to having, a full, cult essentially running your party, which is what we're seeing over there, right? And I don't like. I mean, I don't know. I know there's like talks like, is Pence gonna run? I mean, like, listen, the guy.
I think Pence has thoroughly embarrassed himself at this point.
I mean, because he's like, he can't even choose a lane, right? It's like even still, he's like, well, January 6th is actually the Lincoln Project's fault because they had an ad where they said that I didn't have the power to do this and it taught Trump that I did. It's like you're insane. Like you were literally almost murdered on behalf of the president that you still defend. Like, talk about being a cuck. Like, could you be any more like I couldn't imagine a state of my life where I could possibly be more embarrassed than it to be like Mike Pence in 2022.
I think like that again proves the thesis, right? Where it's like, I think Pence it's not that he can't choose a lane. I think it's his lane is, how do I stay loyal to the machine? And I guess Pence was naive enough to think that Trump would not become the Republican machine or override it. And whether or not, you do the thing of worshiping Mike Pence because he did the bare minimum of a American politician
of not breaking the law.
Yeah, of not breaking the law, right? Like it just goes to show that like the conflict in the Republican Party is are you with the machine? And you don't really get points for sticking with it. So your allegiance is either secret or not. Or are you loyal to Trump? There's no alternative. Okay, you're not going to cast off this stupid ass ideology and like believe anything else. You're definitely not switching over to the Democrats because of everything you believe. So Trump is
not until they give me a candidate who believes everything I believe, and they change the party to conform to my beliefs.
And that's the thing. Trump doesn't even believe the shit they believe.
No.
But Trump offers the alternative, which is him. It's not. I never wanted to become like a guy who blames everything on Trump, but this is the one time I think we can pin everything on him. In the sense of, yeah, there is no... If Trump comes back in 2024, that means the Republican machinery has lost.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious to see if there will be some kind of emerging faction in the Democratic Party. I'm not convinced at this point that there will be a Bernie resurgence, but what's the old Mao quote where every crisis is an opportunity?
I think something like that, yeah.
Yeah, the character for crisis is also the character for opportunity. I mean, I'm not optimistic, but I'm not pessimistic either. I am watching from afar, as one can do at this point.
Yeah, and it's always interesting too, like in the immediate aftermath of an election, like we always kind of...
And we waited a good amount of time. We waited a good amount of time before we did our reporting.
Yeah, that's fair. But there's always the joke that like, there's the never-ending election, right? That it's always like, because Congress, especially the House, it's set up where just every election marks the beginning of the next one and whatnot. And I think, we're definitely seeing that, right? Immediately, like every pundit is jumping on 2024. Does Trump come back? Does Trump's our problem? We need to jettison him somehow. And it's like, I don't know how you're going to placate him because, I mean, the way I see it, I think it's very likely that like if he runs and like DeSantis beats him in the primary somehow, I think you end up with Trump carrying out that threat that he had in 2016. I think he runs third party. I think he just torches that party machine to the ground out of just sheer pettiness.
Let's talk about that at the micro level too, right? Because that seemed to be a dynamic that played out in several local congressional races, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's almost neck and neck between the Democrat and the Republican, and the Libertarians basically split the vote just enough to edge out the Democrat into the victory.
Well, in some cases, right? I mean, I think some of those are coming from, in both cases, like in both sides, right? I mean, I think, if the Libertarian wasn't on the ballot, someone like Warnock probably could have edged out Walker.
Possibly, yeah.
And whatnot. And, that race wouldn't go to a runoff. But, yeah, I mean, what's interesting, like, the role of, like, particularly the Libertarian Party is, kind of the more successful nominally party here in Congress. It's interesting seeing, or not in Congress, but in the electorate. It's interesting to see like the role that they play, and it's kind of weird too, where it's like I feel like the Libertarian Party is like less visible than ever, but like they're getting votes, like enough votes that it's like this is making a difference if you like do a 1-to-1 transfer to a different candidate.
Yeah, and I think the biggest time they had any high level coverage was 2016, right?
Yeah, and with God, what was Ron Johnson?
Not Ron Johnson.
No,
Gary Johnson.
Gary Johnson. Yeah, with what is Aleppo? which was such a weird gaffe that like the media just like latched onto. But
I just 2016 was such a cursed vibe by the time it got to the general, right? Like,
yeah,
I mean, what you had like Hillary with her like uh hubris.
why don't they Pokemon go to the polls?
Oh my god! Don't make me do my Hillary impression. Oh no. I mean, you had Hillary on that side. You had Trump. Whether or not people supported him, like it was just a bizarre, eldritch formulation that brought him to the forefront. And then the libertarians, I mean, they were. I don't know why they got as much coverage as they did. I think maybe because it was this weird desire to see if they were a serious alternative. And I mean,
well,
Gary
I think
Johnson,
too, it was just like that was an election where it was just like, you know, I think that in a lot of ways, I think like just understanding of like presidents and presidential elections is just like deeply tainted by like Obama and his quality as a candidate, where it's like,
yeah,
we're like gas from presidents, right? Even like, you know, and the stuff from Joe Biden, right? I mean, it's you know, it's like it's not as bad as Trump. It's probably, you know, similar in level to Bush, but because we had that, you know, one president who was like, you know, had read a book once in his life, could form a complete and coherent sentence, like because of that, people just have this lofty expectation for, you know, the president. And like as a candidate, right, everyone was excited about him. His first, you know, successful African American candidates, first, you know, like, you know, yeah, hope, you know, we change, yes we can, all that fun stuff. And like 2016 was this like, man, everyone hates both of these candidates,
right.
where else can they look to vote?
And the funny thing about looking at the libertarian primary and the libertarian like memes I saw about it, it just came up because Facebook was a great cesspool for political memes at the time, right? I didn't get on Twitter until too late. But even they shot the bed. Like Gary Johnson looked more sane than these guys, but he was just like I think like it was a question on climate change where he was just like, yeah, it's real, but we're not doing anything about it, so I'm not gonna worry about it. Which was like just a bizarre like death drive ass answer for someone to give.
Yeah, kind of a very like nihilistic answer. Like,
Yeah, he was.
like,
He seemed just
it.
pretty nihilistic. You know what I mean? Like just the way his bizarre haircut, his weird mannerisms. Like he gives me like ambulance chaser lawyer vibes for sure. And then even like the Republican primary, like the guys they had there was just, it was an insane selection. Like there's a meme from one of the debates where like they asked should driver's licenses be allowed, and everyone except Gary Johnson says no in like the weirdest terms they can. One guy goes up to give a speech, gives up halfway through, starts doing a striptease at like a national like nominating convention. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's an absolute mess. Like, you know, as mess, and I think that's like maybe part of like the fascination that has always been like existed with Trump, right? Is he sort of brings some element of that, right? Some of that like that outlaw politics, you know, spectacle that like you only get to see at like, you know, these insane libertarian conferences. I mean, yeah, he never did like a striptease on stage yet. You know, I'm not going to rule it out of the cards.
No, there was the time he admitted he was bi. Folks, I feel so good. I want to kiss all the women and all the men too. Oh my fucking god.
Oh, there's a time Joe Biden came out too, though, to be fair.
I'm transgender.
Yeah, well, there was a time where he literally is like, because he always, that's just one of his speech idioms, right? He's like, when I came out and did this, but like he was talking like at a pride thing. He's like, when I came out, and he's like, yeah, when I came out, and like Anderson Cooper was there, and like he's like, well, that would be news.
Oh god. So I mean, we've kind of run the gauntlet on some of this, on a candidate perspective. there's a couple interesting developments with like various ballot initiatives on various states. Maybe just as a general thing, we can start with the biggest one this year, abortion.
Yeah,
Abortion rights won out on the ballot.
sure did.
Yeah, so before we get to Michigan, right? Like Kentucky had a bizarre one where like the language was so confusing you had to vote no to get the right. But
Okay.
but basically, yeah, that one won out. So Kentucky got the right restored. Vermont as well. Vermont won swimmingly with like 77% or so.
Yeah.
Michigan Prop 3 was very successful. 57% won out. I'm trying to think.
California, I think.
California, Montana as well too.
Possibly, I think so. Yeah.
Let me see. Let me make sure I got this right. And they said Prop 3 in Michigan was confusing.
Yeah, and literally it was just like the language from Roe v. Wade, more or less. Like, and interesting too in Michigan because it was Prop 3 and like all the proposals won. And it was interesting because like they all won by like a little bit more than Prop 3, but that's just because Prop 3, like abortion is just a more controversial issue, right? It doesn't like, those other issues. Like I don't think, the first one I think was something about like it's Michigan was an outlier where you didn't actually have to report your personal finances in the state legislature, and this requires that. And then
it
it
also
has
imposed term limits, right?
A little bit. So like Michigan already had term limits for the state legislature. What this did was before you had, I think, 3 House terms, 2 Senate terms. So you had 14 years. This made it so you have 12 years, but you can spend it wherever. So you can spend it all in one office in theory. So that's kind of interesting. So, but like, again, like people saw term limits as like, sweet. Hell yeah, I hate politicians. So that's kind of how that got passed. And then Prop 2, which I was a little surprised by too, because there was an effort to sort of fight against it. And Prop 2 basically existed entirely to counteract an effort by Republican organizers to basically require voter ID, remove like affidavit type voting, just tighten voting restrictions all around. And that couldn't get on the ballot because they forged a bunch of signatures because, how else would you fight for electoral integrity than, violating the rules of elections? But their intention was to get it on the ballot and not even have it voted on by, the public, but just pass it through the state legislature.
What's the over-under on these two ballot initiatives? Do you think they are a step in the right direction for reform, or are they just more like complexity to add?
I think they're a step in the right direction. I think that there's some complexity. It definitely changes things. Like I think Prop 2 notably gives like I think 6 extra days of early voting. That's going to change how campaigns are run because like, and I think I've seen one thing too where like, and I think this is an interesting thing that I don't necessarily know that the Republican Party is actually going to learn this lesson or not, but they're like, hey, we're getting killed on early ballots, which is like, I mean, would it matter when they're cast? I don't necessarily think so, other than the fact that they've polarized, sort of connotation, right? Like, don't vote, like, because their party's been running on the idea that any ballot that's not cast on election day is illegitimate. So I don't necessarily know how they're going to cultivate.
It's such cope. It's such fucking cope.
Yeah, it's just like, oh well, we won on election day. That's all that matters. It's like, well, turns out.
I wonder what the origin of that thinking is, because this is like somewhat unrelated, right? But like, I had another like post-election conversation with a different group of friends, and I was one of the things that gets under my skin is like how long our campaign cycles are in the United States.
Sure.
Like we have year-long electoral cycles, and like let's say in the UK, for instance, your election period is like what, 2 months, if even.
Yeah, but at this rate, it's like every 2 months. So
I mean, that's true. That's also true. But like, I'm just wondering, like, if campaign seasons were shortened to like half the amount, let's say, or even like a quarter of the amount, right? you wouldn't have like the same weird shit that happened in 2016 where like, for example, oh my God, Hillary Clinton's popularity waning and then like rising up and then waning again. You have
I mean, I will say I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think that it is kind of in that like pipe dream territory where it's just
fair,
like this is not something that will ever like change, right? Because it's like I could see, you know, one party, you can probably guess which one, maybe unilaterally disarming, like, yeah, we need to like pull back. But like in Clinton's case, right, it's the fact that you have just years of like, here's the Benghazi Committee. Remember that time she proposed socialized medicine in this country? What a crazy bitch. You don't want her. Like all like you know, just years of that. Like that's sort of the like the far end of the spectrum, right? Like that is like the farthest like she's basically been on a campaign from the day she stepped into the Oval Office as the first lady to the day, you know, she lost to Trump.
To our point, though, I think like of the various like state voting ballot initiatives, like Michigan's Prop 2 was definitely like one of the better steps.
Yeah.
I think like other states had like requiring photo ID to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Nevada was an interesting one. They had a prop to establish open primaries and implement ranked choice voting.
Interesting. Yeah, I did see that.
And that one won out.
Yeah, ranked choice is interesting. So like it's only in a few places. I think Alaska's the big one, right? So we don't have results in for Alaska yet because of you know, they got to go to round 2. But you know, it's interesting, and it was kind of fun too because I know a lot of Republicans when Peltola, I think is Pelota. I can't remember how you pronounce her name. The Democrat from Alaska. But when she beat Sarah Palin and Begich last time, people like Republicans were like, but like Republicans won like 50% of the vote. How could this be? And it's like, but even in a first past the post system that the rest of the country's in, she still had more votes than the other two candidates.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it. She had 100,000 or so. Palin has 57. Begich has 51,000.
And that's right now. That's not the special election.
That is right now.
Yeah, so like I mean, likely she's probably going to win because at least if like what happened in the special election holds, there's just not those Republican candidates aren't voting 1-to-1 for each other, and like, and if they were going to, why would one of them just not run at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you know that's another example, like the party tearing itself apart, right? You know, and it's like that's not a Trump issue. That's you know Sarah Palin predated him.
Yeah. I'm looking at other ballot initiative things. Another weird one was like slavery was literally on the ballot in some states. Like I think what was it? Louisiana had like a proposal for like
where did it fail?
I can't
because there was like 5 states that all had it, and one of them it failed in. I can't remember which one.
Let me see if it was Kansas. Hang on, I'm looking at the. For some reason, New York Times will let me look at the election breakdown. They won't let you look at anything else, but
yeah, the minute you click on a race, they're like, "Whoa, hold on a second, you got to pay for that."
Yeah, I can't recall. This is definitely one of those episodes where I'm like running through like our DMs just to see.
Yeah,
yeah, no, I can't find it.
Yeah, but it's definitely. I mean, it was so weird. Like, so I'm slightly confused as the origins of it. Like, I don't know if it's like a state constitutional thing that like allowed slavery. I mean, I know. I assume it has to be somewhat tied to, you know, the amendment that actually overturned slavery here, which sort of like is kind of the genesis of the prison industrial complex, right? Because it says like if you're incarcerated, welcome back to bondage, basically, and not the fun kind. You know, so like it's kind of it seems to be a legacy of that. It's interesting to see kind of, you know, that it's on the ballot. I don't know what inspired who to put that on there. It's very disturbing that there was, any percentage of votes against it, even a low percent. But yeah, slavery was on the ballot.
Yeah, and it's like there are certain like understatements of this like renewed interest in like a tough on crime approach to politics,
Mm-hmm.
where I think like that definitely may have played out in okay, hang on. Okay, I'm looking at the Louisiana stuff. I found it now. So, Constitutional Amendment 7 remove constitutional language allowing slavery as punishment. 39% voted yes, 61% voted no.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I'm not sure like what the impetus was for that ballot initiative, but definitely with like the Deep South and just the way we've run our criminal justice system in that part of the country, but as a whole, right? Like
yeah.
what can be said about um the way we exploit our prison populations? And I mean, there is understated stuff about how like prison labor is used to fuel certain aspects of the economy.
Mm-hmm.
There is understated shit about like I mean, this is the only example I've ever seen of it in my life. Funny enough, this was Mardi Gras in New Orleans, 2019. After the parade, what do you think happens? Everyone shows up for the parade, then they head back to their hotel room or they go back to their place, whatever, right? That's most tourist experiences of it. I was over at a friend's home and watching the post parade cleanup. After the place is cleared out, it's basically like a platoon of, I can't remember if it was state or federal prisoners, still in their jumpsuits, marching to pick up the trash as soon as they could. Many of them black, and there was like a guy on a horse in like a policeman's uniform, like, or a corrections uniform, corralling them along. And I'm just like, in my head, I'm like, I don't want to say anything, but this looks very sus.
Yeah, and I mean, even like, I mean, I know like no one would really like attack like community service sentences and stuff like that, but like even that sort of kind of has like, when you really think about it, there's some uncomfy like associations with it when you really think about it, right? Where it's like these
Right.
people are being forced to do that kind of stuff, and it's like, oh, like, it's like, yeah, like the streets need to be cleaned by somebody, I guess, but does it have to be by someone who is, not getting any benefit or anything like that? Like,
Yeah, normally you'd get paid for something like that. I don't even know if they get paid for that. Does it help them with parole or anything like? I don't know. You would hope, but I highly doubt it.
yeah, I'm pretty skeptical too.
Ugh. Some better stuff. Let's see. Drug policy did also pick up in some states. So Maryland legalized cannabis. Missouri legalized cannabis. North Dakota voted no. Arkansas voted no. Colorado, ahead of the game, decriminalize and regulate certain psychedelics.
Yeah, and there was
And South Dakota got it on the ballot, but voted no.
well, what was weird too with Colorado is they legalized psychedelics, but they did not allow the delivery of alcoholic beverages. That lost. Which is like this weird, like, I mean, Colorado, I'm looking at this, they had like, God, it looks like they had like a million ballot proposals. Almost, but like I thought that was funny in the juxtaposition of like, we're into like some hard shit.
Yeah, this is Proposition
but
122. We only have 3 in fucking Michigan. They had what? Not okay. I'm gonna look at.
in Michigan, there was 3 statewide, and there were some villages and whatnot.
Yeah, based on your locality.
Yeah.
Let me see Colorado. Hang on.
I'm sure like the 1 is just some type of I'm sure like the 12 just has to be something. I'm not sure what it was because like here it was like technically proposal like 22-1, 22-2, 22-3, but
Oh man. Okay. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 proposals. 3 of which were amendments, I think.
it's a lot. But yeah, I mean, like, so it's weird too, right? In this whole sort of national scene, and I know, like, Fox News made a big deal about like, this
They made a
national
big deal
crime
about
wave and stuff like that, and I don't know, it's weird. Like, I don't feel like that was like part of like this national conversation, but I did not really get the implication that it was really like resonating with people much.
Well, I think it's also like it's a generational thing too. Because it's not just Fox News, right? You'll also see it
Yeah.
in like what are supposedly democratic havens, like San Francisco local
Yeah.
politics. You see this come up a lot. Miami local politics. You see this come up a lot.
It came up a lot in New York this time
In
too.
New York as well, right? Where I think there's this influx of capital or professionals coming into these cities. And as a result of things like gentrification, GIMBY and NIMBYism, and I don't know, the past 30 years of neoliberalism, like you have the immiseration of the cities, and then you have capital being produced in certain parts of it, but none of it's being distributed equitably. And you have, again, rising housing costs, jobs are a big concern, all that shit, right?
Mhm.
So based on where you live, or in our case, because like in the Midwest, I don't see it come up as often, but I'd say with older people it resonates harder. With our age cohort, I don't see it come up unless someone's like already right wing, for example.
Yeah, and it's weird too because like at least this cycle, it seems like when it came up, it was like primarily pointing out like look at these homeless people, and
Right,
like it was like a
right.
proxy for like crime, and it's like, well, like is it like? I mean, it's so it was just kind of it was coded this time in ways that I don't think was super useful.
100%, 100%. I I don't know. That is the tricky thing about election coverage for me at this point, is like when you don't have like your direct buy-in, aside from like, okay, I'll vote for like this ballot proposal, but I'm not enthusiastically voting for anything else, right?
Mhm.
Finding out who the different cohorts are gets a little tougher because you don't interact with them as aggressively or as often.
Sure.
But yeah, I think also, yeah, with Michigan, I think Prop 3 and abortion rights just ended up being the biggest thing. So I
Yeah, and
think
I
we were
mean,
kind of spared some of that.
yeah, and it's interesting to me. So, like, I mean, you look at turnout; it beat 2018, which was a really high midterm turnout year. It didn't beat 20, which is not too shocking. But yeah, I mean, it brought people out to vote, one way or the other, and primarily for. I mean, um, one thing too, like, I mean, there was pictures and videos of like at MSU. Students were lined up past midnight at U of M. I think the last person cast his ballot there, or her. I don't necessarily remember who. At like 2:19. Like these people were in line, and like polls closed at 8, right? Like but if you were in line, you still got to vote, and like people were lined up. Like the youth turned out in ways that like were not expected at all.
So youth turnout is higher on average overall.
Yeah.
Okay. And how's turnout looking just in general compared to like for the whole country, if you know?
Let me see if I can find that real quick. Um, it seems like it's mixed. Um, Of course, well, they want my money.
God damn it.
That's like I was like, oh, I've exceeded my one free article. So in a few places, it's less. Like looks like West Virginia, less turnout. Tennessee, less turnout. Nationwide, generally it was on level or exceeded. So Michigan exceeded, Maine succeeded, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Colorado, Oregon. I can't see the south of the nation because of the paywall. So yeah, I mean, it really kind of depended. I don't know the exact correlation with what was on the ballot in these states. Pennsylvania higher turnouts, New Hampshire, Vermont, South Dakota, Iowa. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure those Iowa voters weren't excited to vote for Chuck Grassley for another 6 years. I'm sure other stuff influenced turnout there.
I know I added certain candidates we might have been able to riff on the outline, but something that we were riffing about was what is it? Chuck Grassley is literally older than Social Security numbers.
Yeah, older than Social Security numbers, older than chocolate chip cookies,
older than sliced bread.
He's slightly younger than sliced bread.
Oh shit, my bad.
My favorite, and just because of the absurdity of it, it's obviously not accurate, but it was like Chuck Grassley, who was born on Pangea, will be representing his state for 6 more years.
And
then there was one of those as Twitter is wont to do now, there was one of those fake verified accounts that was like impersonating him, where it's like, I've actually been dead for the past 4 years, and then we're just Weekend at Bernie's setting it up here.
Oh god, that's been the most that's been the crazy thing about election coverage this cycle too, is like Twitter has been like a repository for like political coverage and media as of late.
And I was shocked at how, I thought election night we were going to see the place collapse in real time. Like, I was convinced you were going to get people impersonating Nate Silver and just posting bullshit, and we didn't. I was really shocked. It's most of the trolls are just like, I'm Elon Musk and I'm going to say something really stupid. And then I don't know if you saw this, but Elon Musk had just attacked Ed Markey today.
Oh god, I saw that.
Yesterday, and Markey's literally on the communications committee. It's what a fucking idiot. It's what would maximize my chance of getting investigated?
Between the Twitter nonsense and then this weird crypto breakdown that's happening, are tech CEOs okay?
It depends on which blue check you're asking. Are they verified because they paid $8? Or
did you get the blue check because you produce cultural value, or because you paid?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's been kind of fun watching that all implode. Deservedly implode.
Honestly, where are you heading if Twitter falls? Because I don't think I'm going. I don't know if I'm following anywhere.
God, I don't know. I mean, and it's weird.
The podcast Blind sounds so fun.
I mean, it's weird because I probably spend an unhealthy amount of time on Twitter and whatnot.
I mean, me too, but yeah.
But there's a certain reprieve you get from it. And I used Tumblr in high school a bit, and I've described it as woke 4chan.
Yep. That is it. That is 100% it.
Because it's Twitter. I mean, yeah, you obviously have some people who are joke accounts and things like that and whatnot, but you have a little bit less, you have more people willing to just be yes, this is me, this is who I am, this is my semi-professional identity. And I think it's sort of normalized certain sort of a blend of recreation and professionalism that I think is good. I think it's healthy that people are a little bit more open with their interests and stuff like that, and it's
mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe in some cases, do you want to see their porn likes? Probably not, but shit happens. But Tumblr was just it's mostly anonymous. No one is themselves there. They're all some type of character.
But everyone needs to prove that like they're knowledgeable on something. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and very specifically, and like I use like the woke label because it's like, it's kind of in that more like cultures war sphere, right? It's like, yes, like, it was kind of, like an oppression party at times where it was like, this is
100%.
how like gender identity, and like not saying that like gender identity and stuff's not important or anything like that, but like that was like all that like of any remote substance was discussed on there, right? It wasn't like about economic justice or anything like that. It's just like, well, I identify as, this particular collection of labels, fair enough, but it's not like, like it, give me something a little bit more, right? No one, I mean, I can't say no one's trying to stop you from identifying that way, but, no one here is preventing you from doing that. So, like, it's just kind of, I don't know. I don't think Tumblr's it. Mastodon, from what I understand, is really bad. I think I've heard.
I tried making an account and then immediately I met with what server do you want to join? And I'm like, so you mean I'm not dumped in with everyone else? I have to pick.
Yeah, I've heard like it takes like someone said that like, it took like 6 hours to just send a message. I'm like, what?
Oh fuck that! I'm not joining. Fuck this.
Like, excuse me. Like that sounds useless. And obviously you haven't even like flirted like going back to like Facebook.
Like, no, I deleted my Facebook. I deleted my Instagram. Dude, feels like pure fucking heroin.
Oh my god. Yeah.
I've never tried it. I'm just saying it like it feels really good. I don't know what it is about Facebook and Instagram, right? But with Instagram, it's like this idea of creating this perfect self for like the display to the world. That just feels weird.
Oh, it's even more shallow than Tumblr.
It's even more shallow. And then like Facebook is like, one, it's been colonized by everyone older than 50, right?
Yeah. Which is funny because like that had been an issue. And I think like, not to relate it 2016, but I think 2016 was really when that came to a head, right? We talked, there's been a lot of talk about like, Facebook misinformation and stuff like that. But it's like, I think that was like, just like where you had battles, right? I know like some of my cousins would regularly get into huge fights because one was very liberal and the other was ultra conservative.
And then you would have like the 50 comment threads where like,
yep.
Either it ends with them like trying to be nice, or it just ends with like, oh, and by the way, your mother's a whore. Like it never ends.
Well, that actually was exactly how one ended, basically.
Oh, fuck me. Okay.
Well, and like I mean, I have a family that's like big enough where like very realistically, like I wouldn't say I know everyone in my family on like a personal level. Like I've seen them like a few times in some cases. The core of it I see a lot, but whatnot. But like it's big enough that there are some people who are the black sheeps that are just sort of voluntarily the black sheeps. Like yes, they're sort of on the outskirts and whatnot, but it's like yeah, I think that's like it's been colonized by not only that, but it's like algorithmically, it's just like meme pages. Like that's like I don't see
all the good ones
substance.
Got kicked off.
Yeah, all the good ones got kicked off. It's just like, oh, hey, here's like what low rent thing can I say about a popular TV show? You know what I mean? It's just like that's all it is. And like,
did you
like,
know in Marvel's The Avengers, Iron Man puts on a suit?
Yeah, like I mean, I'm scrolling through Facebook right now. Like, there's a Game of Thrones thing that like anyone with 2 brain cells that watch the show could put together. Like, there's
it's all
Pokemon,
babies first
like,
symbolism. Oh my god.
Yeah, and it's just like I mean, I'm seeing like, and like ads just inundate the place, and like Twitter's gotten bad about that too. But like it's like Facebook was first, where it was just like, we have sold your data to the highest bidder. Have fun with this.
Oh my god. I think you know what I take the passing of Twitter as a bittersweet occasion. I think it's time to like fair. Get your mutuals, find a Discord server, just so that you have another place to gather if shit hits the fan. But while Twitter's like a fun site because yeah, you do get to like meet people with common interests and riff and like it's cool in that sense. It's also just like it has produced some of the most diseased takes I've ever seen. And it's allowed the class of
Hey, I can't say it's produced the most diseased takes I've ever seen because the New York Times literally posted a piece today saying that was it New York Times? No, The Atlantic. That DeSantis's COVID gamble paid off. The dude literally like people literally died, but hey, his political ambitions are in great shape. Like what?
oh my fucking god. I think you have a point. It's like, no, the disease takes were already there. We just saw it on display.
Yeah, they're just synthesized through Twitter now.
Maybe there's a net good to this. Maybe I'm trying to see the silver lining in Twitter collapsing.
Like the silver lining is that like it probably will it was probably a bane to my productivity. You know what I mean? Like it's probably had negative implications on my life that I have lacked the discipline to take care of. I'll freely admit that. But
whom among us?
Yeah, I'll admit that there's that silver lining, but I'll be a little sad to see it go. I mean, there's no clear alternative. I mean, Reddit's obviously not. I mean, that's kind of the same.
Oh, fuck
deal.
Fuck that. Yeah, I mean, shit. What was I gonna say? I just had a Brandon moment. Yeah, no, that thought is gone. I don't know where that thought went.
Well, just as the fleeting of Chuck Grassley's lifespan, so goes some thoughts.
We are all doomed to become Chuck Grassleys in our own time. The question is, do we accept it with grace, or
do we welcome the pigeons?
Dear God,
into our home.
That's the challenge, ain't it?
Sure is.
I guess, I don't know. I feel like we've thoroughly exhausted our outline at this point. We've been at it for like an hour and a half. I did want to just say fuck JD Vance.
Well, that was another one too. I was thinking, like, it's like, because they're like, oh, all Trump's candidates lost. It's like, well, this lunatic won. Like, are we going to ignore that?
Vance was an interesting one, right? Because didn't he make his didn't he make his name like being an anti? I mean, he had a column and everything before then, but he kind of positioned himself as like an anti-Trump guy, and then took Peter Thiel's money, and then has been trying to position himself as a base nationalist or whatever. But
yeah,
I again, there's just something so gross to me about a guy who like made a whole career off of being ashamed that he was Appalachian, and is now like trying to play up that identity to win it, well, to have one in Ohio. And honestly, Ohio guys, you got to step it up in the Midwest game, okay? Like you guys are literally next to Indiana, the worst performers in the Midwest. You just got to step it up a little bit, man.
Yeah, I know you had that Twitter space where you were like talking about how bad, like, what's the worst state in the Midwest, and like, I mean, Ohio's the go-to one, right? But it's like, I mean, I remember the first time I went to Indiana, and I'm like, this is a different kind of place. This place is built different.
There's something about Indiana to me where it's like they took the civic religion aspect of America and they saw themselves as like building a new Republican style like society. But there's just like particles of fascism like latent throughout. I don't know how to say it.
One of the weirdest things about Indiana that I noticed was like when I was on the highway there, and it was like the speed limit for both commuters and trucks was the same. I'm like, man, only in a state that elected Mike Pence as their governor would capital have to move at the same speed as everyone else.
Shit.
Or everyone have to move at the same speed as capital, like.
There, I don't know.
Here we get to speed around them.
And it's crazy to think that like it's it's dismissed as this Republican stronghold, right? But there are these weird histories where like Eugene V. Debs was from was he from Des Moines? Yeah, he was from Des Moines. Oh no, he was from Terre Haute, my bad. And then you had like weird like socialist utopian communities, and even like you have all the makings of like just the rest of the Midwest, but with its weird history as being like a Klan hub and like just the rise of Republican politics in Indiana. I don't fucking know. There's
a wild place.
There's a bizarre vibe, and I mean that's not to say that any state in the country is comparatively better. You know, it's all on stolen land. It's this fucking horrible system. Blah blah blah. But I don't know.
We can all agree Florida's objectively the worst.
Florida feels cursed to me because it's like you took the Caribbean and you just put the suburbs over it. There's
literally over like the literally over the Atlantic too. Like literally like some suburbs are literally built into the ocean and wrecked by a hurricane and just it's very much just like human ingenuity will find its way to like invade every aspect of nature. That is like the story of Florida.
Yeah, like not to be a dirty tree hugger or something, but there's something demonic about it. You know what I mean? Just taking American suburbia and just defiling natural beauty to like put it in.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I've gotten out all my post midterm takes. Anything else that we should consider or anything that we missed?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think we got like the big. I mean, I guess a special shout out to our boy Fetterman beating Dr. Oz.
Our big boy.
Yeah, here's for more Midwest ogres making it into office. Yeah, I mean that was exciting to like have that happen. I think it's kind of cool. Like yeah, he was kind of more of a I think at times it felt like he was kind of a meme candidate, but like hey, he seems to genuinely support a lot of the stuff that we like, and yeah, like cool. Like
there is some stuff about his record that does bug me. He's not perfect.
Sure, yeah.
Like, of all the candidates to try the meme approach, he definitely won out. And like we said in the last episode,
really beat his opponent who tried the same approach just really badly.
I think you know what, there is just one fundamental law to all of this. If you're going to riff, it better be funny.
Yeah.
I think that holds true.
It's the universal truth.
All right. I think editing is going to be pretty light for this one. I think I just got to delete my brain farts. So anything else you want to... God, it's been a minute since I've done the outro. Give me a sec.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we need the outro.
We need the outro, and then we go to plugs. 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Well, this has been another episode of Greenhouse Gaslighting. You can find all the links to our social media in the description below. I'll also include Josh's social media and his other project, MonsterPop, which is a great podcast about pro wrestling. So I'll have their social media in the link below. Anything else you want to plug before we get going, Josh?
I think that's about it. I think thanks for listening, and we had some fun getting some stuff off our chest about the midterm and the state of American politics in 2022 period. Definitely a really interesting race. It'll be kind of, I'm sure we'll be covering plenty of the consequences for a while.
Yeah, time will tell if this is just another mere occurrence of events, or if this is a dark omen of events to come. But try not to worry about that. All right. Thanks again for tuning in, dear listeners. Bye-bye.